But what I was looking at was what I was calling a weekend review, looking at some accounts, specifically a couple of experimental accounts, just trading on demo for now. I'm probably only going to show you demo stuff for a long time because I don't know what the risks are. Probably minimal, but just in case. This is a automated system. It's fully automated, but basically I keep it on a tight leash and stop and start it when I think trading is conducive. It's a trend following system, and things have been fairly trendy. You can see that the return by trade is a little all over the place. I'm still figuring out how to smooth out some of these swings with equity over time, which is the way I like to look at things. Looks promising. You can see that here while I was configuring and working, there was actually a bug in the expert advisor I was working on, and then I worked out the bug, and I think that helped, and then the market sort of clearly moved in a direction, and I think that helped even more. The last few days haven't been that turbulent, and it's sort of been able to hang out here, but we'll see what happens. If we have a few more days like we've seen, it may continue this way. If things change radically, we may see it bump around, and it may turn out this system is actually just a victim of good luck, and its expectancy is random. This is the manual system, and I think it's safe to say the expectancy of this system is not random. And this is a stellar performance, even by my standards, and I don't know if we can expect it again next week, because mean reversion may take hold and have an effect on things. And yeah, despite that, very promising. If things continue the way they have been, then it would be possible to double this account in a month and a half, 6 weeks, which is pretty good. Details on these systems, I'm not really ready to release them yet, although you can find information on the expert advisor that is trading this system, and in fact, you can download it from the thread on Forex Factory. And if you follow me and look at my activity, you should be able to dig it up without too much trouble. Yeah, so pretty interesting few weeks in trading live and demo. Too bad that the trade of the week when I first started streaming didn't work out, but we're learning. And the rest of this time, I think what I would like to do is just get some of the BabyPips stuff out of the way. Did not have time to work on it today at all. Dealing with family and life in the time of coronavirus. All right, let's move this over. Let's look at the chapter that we're going to talk about. As I mentioned before, BabyPips has some good basic info. It's very accessible. It's fun. Look at this guy. Disgusting. The topic today is what is margin trading? I don't think I'm going to, unfortunately, show you the entire BabyPips site there because I'm not really allowed. But what I can do is read it while I take notes. Pretty sure that's allowed. And I can show you my notes. So let's do that. Margin Trading 101. A pretty extensive unit, very important to understand because it's the leverage in forex that gives it its power and also its ability to destroy. All right, so this is actually chapter 1, section 1, chapter 5, which is called "What is Margin Trading?" Question mark. The biggest appeal that forex trading offers is the ability to trade with margin. I think that is probably true. But margin is a concept that's often misunderstood. Well, that's easy to see because it's not. It's technically abstruse. Let's see if I can do this. Margin trading gives you the ability to enter into positions larger than your account balance. Yes. Margin, these are my own words. Margin is like a security deposit. Oops. On a, what do I call it? A large commitment. A larger commitment. So even though, like I mentioned, forex prices don't move that much, even in very volatile times in comparison to their units of currency, it's rare for the US dollar to move a penny in a day, for example. Although lately, you can't include the last few days in anything that I'm about to talk about, but in general, currencies don't move that much. So in order to make a profit or to make it worthwhile trading, you need to be trading large quantities, large volumes. And to be able to trade those large volumes, you either need to have a very large account and be already extremely wealthy, or you need to be able to essentially borrow the leverage, which you do through something called margin. So with just a small change in price, you have the possibility of making massive profits, but you can also quickly have massive losses. And as traders, we have to focus on the losses more than the profits. So BabyPips has a character named Bob who's fairly clueless and is asking what happened to his account. How did he get a margin call? And how did he get stopped out? A margin call is when a broker forcibly closes a trade due to insufficient margin as a result of contrary, what's the word? Let's call it adverse excursion. An adverse excursion is a very euphemistic way of saying your trade went against you and you got screwed. Some brokers will warn you and give you the opportunity to add capital to your balance. I guess that's a new point. a lot of new traders don't understand the concept of margin, how it's used, how to calculate it. And do you know what it is? And the difference between used margin, free margin, margin level. There's a lot of margin jargon. So a stop out, I guess we'll define that. The maximum drawdown in a position when it is forcibly closed. So when you say that a trade was stopped out, some traders mean that the trade hit their stop loss, a maximum loss that they're willing to take on their own trade that they've set. But every broker also will set a maximum loss on any trade that you can take. And they do this for numerous reasons. For one thing, that's their end goal. They want your money. And so when you stop out, they get your money. But the other reason is that they can't allow you to go too far into debt before you lose everything, or possibly more than everything. And they know that collecting from you is going to be difficult. Even though every broker warns you that actual losses can exceed your deposit, they're not probably going to invest too much effort in going after you for the extra amount. They'll stop you before you get to that point. All right. Metrics. And they have a diagram of the MetaTrader 4 terminal. I guess we'll look at mine. It's a demo account anyway. But you can see some numbers here. Things like the balance, the equity, the margin, the free margin, and the margin level. All right, so I guess what I'll do is go through these with my own probably insufficient definitions, and then we'll look at the BabyPips definition. Your balance is basically how much money is in your account. But probably a more important measure is the equity, which is the amount of settled money in your account. Your balance is a combination of what you have won, and it doesn't reflect any unrealized losses. Whereas the equity will show you what will happen if you closed all your trades at that. Like if you closed them right now, what would happen? Margin is the amount of money that you need to be able to put up to control the positions that you have. It's essentially like a security deposit, I think is the best way to think of it. You can think of it as a loan, but you're not really borrowing anything. It's just what you need to be able to have in your account for the broker to have confidence that you can handle these trades. Free margin. Now, how do we define free margin? I mean, essentially, it's the margin that's being used. No, it's not. Free margin is different from used margin. All right, we'll talk about it in a second. The margin level is a percentage of the ratio between your free margin and the amount of your equity. And so essentially, if you want this percentage to be as high as possible. And so 6,424% is a healthy percentage. 100% or less is not healthy. You never want your margin level to dip down. I mean, I don't ever want it to dip down less than 200%. But it depends on the account. It depends on the situation. You never want to get into that territory though, because then you're getting very close to the red line. All right, what are we going to put in this slide? We're really defining things. Yeah, but you should know. Okay, let's do this. Yeah, no, let's make a new slide. That's good for this one. All right, let's look at this next section. We'll talk about balance. What is the account balance? All right, so to start trading, you need to open an account with a retail broker. They're calling it a retail broker or CFD provider. It's the same thing. And you need to fund it with risk capital. Risk capital is money you can afford to lose. It shouldn't be your rent. It shouldn't be money that you're saving for your aunt or grandma's surgeries. It's going to be money that you can say goodbye to, because when you're starting off, the odds are very much against you keeping it. And so the balance is simply the starting amount of your account, especially before you placed any trades. It's the amount of cash in your account. So I'll call it cash. If you deposit $1,000, then your balance is $1,000. And that's not going to change until you open a position, which means enter into a trade. And there are many ways that you can affect this. You can add more funds to your account. You could close a position, which would restore the margin to your account. Or you could suffer or gain from swap fees. All of those things would affect your account balance. So let's say adding funds, closing positions, and swap fees can affect your balance. So I should say adding, entering, and closing. Now this section starts talking about swap and rollover, but we kind of covered that. I'm going to skip that. Let's talk about realized and unrealized losses. Unrealized and floating profits and losses. So when you open a position, price is going to almost immediately move either in your favor or against you, probably against you to start with. And that affects your equity, but it doesn't affect your balance. So an open position is a floating profit or loss. Because the value is constantly changing, your position is still open, and it's not until you close that trade that it becomes quote unquote real. And I guess the word floating is derived from the fact that value is constantly fluctuating. So say you open a position and it goes down by 200 pips, that would give you a floating loss of $200. Your balance is still $1,000, but your equity is going to be $800. And the loss is floating because you haven't closed that trade yet. And as long as you have enough margin, you can keep that trade unclosed and the loss unrealized. And usually in that situation, you're hoping the trade's going to turn around and go back into profit. And then it's just nothing but a bad memory, or not even a bad memory. It's something you can forget about. But if things start to go against you too far, then that is a trade you're going to have to close. And so I'll just say a closed trade will provide a realized profit or loss. And the root word in realized is real, because that will affect your balance. So a realized loss comes from a completed trade. And basically, if you close positions with profits, then your balance increases. And if you close them with losses, then your account balance decreases. That's pretty basic and obvious, I guess. BabyPips gives you a lot of examples that you probably don't really need because it's easy to figure that out. Realized profits and losses. The calculation is simply the balance times the amount the price has moved times the volume that you're trading. But we're going to talk about volumes later. Profit isn't real until it's realized. Yeah, it works the other way. You can have a trade that's very much up and giving you a really nice profit, and then quickly have it drop back down and wipe you out. All right, so now let's talk about margin. Duplicate that slide. You only need to ante up a small amount of capital to open a fairly large position. So if you wanted to buy like 100 grand of Japanese yen, you don't have to put up the full amount for that transaction. You could just put up a portion like $3,000. The amount depends on the broker. And it's like collateral, it's security. privilege of that leverage facility. Margin is a portion of funds that are set aside by the broker to ensure that you can cover any potential loss. And that margin is dynamic. It'll go up and down depending on the fortune of your trade. If your trade goes with you, the amount of margin the broker will require will go down. And if the trade goes against you, the amount of margin the broker requires will go up. The graphic on BabyPips shows required margin is like a little jail cell, and a bag of money is inside that jail cell because it's locked away. Margin is expressed as a percentage of the full position size, also known as the notional value of the position you're to open. So I showed you that percentage in the terminal a while ago. And the percentage is known as the margin requirement. And the margin requirement varies based on the pair, and you can find it in the specification on your trading terminal. So let's look at that. Here I am opening the market watch. So let's see if I want to look at the pound. And it's got certain values here. Margin currency, pound. Margin calculation mode, forex. I don't know what the alternative to that is. Margin percentage, 100%. So I guess the ratio is 100%. Everything you put up is what you have to put up? Nah, it can't be right. Let's look at the Aussie yen. Its margin percentage is also 100%. For gold, the margin percentage is only 1%. Interesting. All right. So let's talk about margin requirement, because I don't have to capitalize that. It's the amount of margin required to open a position as a percentage and I guess we should call it the margin requirement. That's what it's usually referred to. And then required margin is the specific amount of your account's currency needed to open a position. Other words for required margin are deposit margin, entry margin, initial margin. You may see all of those depending on who you trade with. All right. let's break protocol here for a second and look at this specific example. To buy or sell 100,000 of euros of fiber without leverage would require the trader to put up $100,000 in account funds, the full value of the position. Now, looking at that, specification, and it says margin percentage 100%. I don't know if that's just like because we're in demo mode or what, but that can't be right. I don't think that's required. With a margin requirement of 2%, only $2,000, which is the required margin, would be needed to open and maintain 100 grand of that fiber position. So you have $100,000 trade size, $2,000 margin requirement. And for a mini lot to 200 and a micro lot, just $20. All right, so if you deposited $1,000 in your account and you want to go long on the yen, you open a mini lot. How much margin do we need to open this position? If it's 2%, $200. They're saying $400, so it must be 4%. There you go. Margin requirement is 4%. Okay, dry stuff, I admit, even for me. BabyPips goes on to show you more examples with different percentages, different currencies. It's all the same idea. How to calculate the required margin? Well, the broker does that for you. But there is a complex calculation. It's a percentage of the position size. The specific amount of required margin is calculated according to the base currency of the currency pair traded. Here is the formula. Okay, we'll copy the formula. Yeah, we'll do that. Oh my God. Just hate. Why does it do that? This is my last line available, so. Oh, it just fits. You gonna be able to see that? Yes. So the formula is the notional value times the margin requirement if the currency is the same as your account currency. The base currency is the same as your account currency. If it's different, I don't need that line there. Oh, I guess I do. Then required margin is the notional value times the margin requirement times the exchange rate between the base and the account currency. Everyone's asleep. Everyone's asleep. This might be the most boring section ever. Yeah, this is important. Maybe this is the most important part of the video. Your ability to open trades depends on margin, not on the account size, not on your balance. So the broker is automatically checking to make sure that you have enough margin to be able to open positions. All right. Oh, I just wish that fit on the other one. Doesn't matter. All right. You know what? We'll just call this used margin and leave that point here. Oh, I see. Used margin equals required margin times any trades you have open. So every time you open a new trade, the amount of required margin accumulates because there's margin required for one trade that you enter, and you open a new trade, there's required margin for that trade as well. And it's additive. It adds up. And the total amount of margin that you're using is your used margin. All right. And then there's a whole bunch of examples, but we don't need a whole bunch of examples because that's a pretty simple idea. The notional margin times the margin requirement is the required margin, and the used margin is the sum of the required margin from all open positions. All right, cruising through this. Now, what is equity? Equity is the value of your account including unrealized P&L. If you have no trades open, then the equity is the same as your account balance. If you have trades open, then the equity is the account balance plus your floating P&L. I don't think we need to put a bloody mathematical equation there. That's pretty simple. So the difference between balance and equity is the difference between your account balance and your account balance with unrealized profits and losses. All right, that's used margin, equity, and free margin, all on one slide because these concepts are so simple. All right, so we looked at used margin, which is the amount of margin you're using to keep positions open. Free margin is the margin you have left. So free margin equals total margin minus used margin. So whereas used margin is the aggregate of all the required margin from all open positions, free margin is the difference between your equity and used margin. Okay. So instead of calling this total margin, we'll call it equity. Free margin is also known as usable margin. It's margin that you can still take advantage of, that you can still use. It's the amount of margin you have available to open new positions. And it's your lifeline, I would say, in any trading endeavor. Your free margin is what stands between you and existing positions from a margin call or stop out. Right? If your free margin gets used up, chewed up, then you'll get a margin call or stop out. But if you have lots of free margin available still, then even a fairly big loss, unrealized loss, is something that you may be able to recover from. All right, equity minus used margin. There we go. I derived that formula without even having to do it. So BabyPips goes through a lot of examples, which I think just confuses you more than anything. The more examples, the more potential for getting confused. In some cases, not every case. All right, this one is about margin level. Margin level is the percentage value based on the amount of equity versus used margin. So where we had, it's basically free margin expressed as a percentage. And that was the value that I showed you over here in the terminal. Right? This right here, margin level. Free margin expressed as a percentage. There's free margin expressed as a raw dollar amount. And then there's margin, the actual security that you need to have to open any given trade. The higher the margin level, the more free margin you have available to trade, obviously. Here's how you calculate margin level. The ratio of equity and used margin. Oops. If you have no trades open, your margin level will be 0. And most brokers will set your margin level and limit it at 100%. So when your margin level is below 100%, you can't open any new positions. Very uncomfortable position to be in. And then BabyPips just spams you with examples again. But while actually trading, your broker will keep track of all of this in real time. And the main number that you want to look at is this one here, the percentage, making sure that it stays above 100%. You also want to be looking at your equity. Your balance is less important than the equity. And equity is really the number that you want to be increasing. And balance is really just a temporary state of affairs. All right. So let's put this into words, and then I say we are done with this section. Oh my gosh, this is a long video. Probably everybody skipped it, and I don't blame them. So margin level is the ratio between equity and used margin expressed as a percentage. If your equity is, let's say, $1,000 and used margin is $200, the margin level is 500%.